Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Definitely. Always up for exploring new ways to connect better.
Me too, especially when it comes to something as universal as relationships. I mean, who doesn't want stronger, healthier bonds with the people in their lives, right?
Absolutely. Whether it's family, friends, romantic partners, or even colleagues, those connections make life richer.
So true. And today we're diving deep into the guide, How to Build Healthier Relationships. Practical steps to strengthen connections to, well, figure out how to do just that.
Sounds like a plan.
It is. So often we get caught up in the day-to-day and just assume that our relationships are running smoothly. But have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you were talking to a brick wall?
I think we've all been there at some point. You're trying to express something important, and it just feels like your message isn't getting through.
Exactly. And that's why this guide kicks things off by focusing on communication, because it really is the bedrock of any strong relationship.
It's funny, right? We often think that communication is just talking, but really it's so much more than that.
So much more. And the guide points out that a lot of times we think we're being clear, but our message isn't being received the way we intended. So where do we even begin to fix that?
Well, the first step is to shift our mindset from talking at someone to truly listening to them, like really listening, to understand, not just to respond.
Active listening. I've heard that term before. But what does it actually look like in practice?
Imagine you're having a conversation with a friend who's going through a tough time. Instead of just waiting for your turn to speak or offering solutions, you're fully present with them. You're paying attention to their words, their tone of voice, even their body language.
So you're absorbing everything they're communicating, not just on a verbal level, but also emotionally.
Precisely. You're trying to step into their shoes and see the situation from their perspective. And a really powerful technique the guide suggests is reflecting back what you've heard. At first, it might feel a little awkward, but it works wonders in ensuring that you're both on the same page.
Okay, give me an example. Like, how would you reflect back what someone's saying without sounding like a parrot?
For instance, if your friend is venting about a stressful situation at work, you could say something like, "So what I'm hearing is you're feeling incredibly overwhelmed and undervalued right now."
Right, right. You're
Not
basically summarizing their feelings and making sure you've got it right.
Mm.
That takes the pressure off them to keep explaining themselves.
Exactly. And it prevents those frustrating moments later on where it's like, wait, that's not what I meant at all. And did you know there's actually research backing this up? Studies have shown that couples who use reflective listening techniques report feeling significantly more understood and validated in their relationships.
Makes sense. So, active listening, check. Reflecting back, check. What other communication gems does this guide offer?
Oh, it also highlights the power of using I statements, especially when things get a bit heated. It's a way to express your feelings without placing blame or putting the other person on the defensive.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do I statements work exactly?
Let's say you're feeling frustrated because your partner constantly interrupts you. Instead of saying, "You always cut me off," which can come across as accusatory, you could try, "I feel frustrated when I don't get to finish my thought."
Ah, I see. So you're owning your feelings and explaining how their actions impact you, but without attacking them.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift in language, but it can make a big difference in how your message is received.
Makes total sense. But, even with the best communication skills in the world, there are times when our emotions just get the better of us. That's where the whole concept of emotional triggers comes into play, right?
You got it. The guide emphasizes that understanding your triggers is crucial for managing those knee-jerk reactions that can sabotage relationships.
And those triggers, they can be pretty sneaky, can't they?
They sure can. What might seem like a minor comment or situation can actually trigger a much deeper emotional response based on past experiences.
I know I've definitely had moments where I've overreacted to something and later realized it was because it touched on a sensitive issue from my past.
Absolutely. It could be something from your childhood, a previous relationship, anything that's left an emotional imprint. And that's why self-awareness is key here. The guide encourages us to really examine our own emotional patterns and identify those specific things that tend to set us off.
Right, so if you know that being ignored or spoken to in a condescending tone really pushes your buttons, you can start to anticipate and manage those reactions better.
Exactly. The guide suggests hitting that pause button before reacting. Easier said than done, I know, but even taking a few deep breaths can give you that space to choose a more thoughtful response.
It's like that classic advice to count to 10 before saying anything when you're angry. Gives you a chance to cool down and avoid saying something you'll regret.
Exactly. And in addition to that pause, the guide emphasizes the importance of communicating your feelings calmly and clearly, even when you're upset. It's not about bottling things up or exploding, but finding that sweet spot of assertive communication.
Makes sense. So we've tackled communication and emotional triggers. What's next on our relationship building agenda?
Well, you can't talk about healthy relationships without talking about boundaries. The guide really drives home the point that boundaries aren't about building walls or shutting people out, but about creating healthy guidelines for respect and self-care.
I love that. It's like setting those clear expectations for how we want to be treated and how we'll treat others.
Right. And the guide emphasizes that boundaries are essential for preventing resentment and burnout, which can ultimately poison our relationship. It's about honoring your own needs and making sure they're met in a way that respects the needs of others.
Okay, so how do we go about setting those boundaries effectively? Because I know that can be a tricky conversation to have, especially with people we're close to.
It all boils down to clear, direct communication. No beating around the bush. For instance, if your family has a habit of dropping by unannounced and it drives you crazy, you could say something like, "Hey, I love seeing you all, but I'd really appreciate it if you could give me a call before coming over. It helps me manage my time and energy better."
Straightforward and respectful. I like it. But what happens when people don't respect those boundaries, even after you've communicated them?
Well, the guide stresses the importance of consistency. If you set a boundary and then constantly cave, it sends mixed messages and can actually lead to more conflict down the line.
So it's not about being rigid or controlling, but about staying true to those guidelines you've established for yourself.
Exactly. It's about self-respect and respecting the boundaries set by others. It's a two-way street, like any other aspect of a healthy relationship.
Absolutely. Boundaries, communication, managing those emotional triggers, it's all starting to come together. But is there anything else that can help us really supercharge our relationships?
I'd say the secret ingredient is gratitude.
Oh, I love that. Gratitude really can make such a difference, can't it?
It's like shifting your focus from what's lacking to what's already wonderful. The guide suggests making gratitude a regular practice. It could be something as simple as expressing thanks to your partner for making dinner or sending a text to a friend telling them how much you appreciate their support.
It's so easy to get caught up in the daily grind and forget to appreciate the good things. But when you consciously make an effort to notice and express gratitude, it can transform your whole perspective on a relationship.
Couldn't agree more. There's a ton of research showing that couples who regularly express gratitude report higher levels of relationship satisfaction and are less likely to experience burnout or resentment.
Really, that's fascinating. So it's not just a feel-good practice. It actually has tangible benefits for relationships.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be these grand, sweeping gestures. It's those small, everyday moments of appreciation that really weave the fabric of connection. Like maybe you make your partner their favorite meal, or you leave a little thank you note for a colleague who helped you out with the project. It's those little things that go a long way.
Yeah, I remember once a friend was going through a really rough time, and I sent her flowers just to cheer her up. Later, she told me how much that small gesture meant to her, how it made her feel seen and cared for.
It's those little acts of kindness that can really brighten someone's day and strengthen the bond between you.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into building healthier relationships, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that it's an ongoing process, a commitment to nurturing those connections day after day.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And even small changes like practicing active listening, expressing gratitude more often, or setting healthy boundaries can have a ripple effect over time.
It's so true. And I think it's important to remember that even the strongest relationships have their ups and downs. But with consistent effort and a willingness to grow together, we can build truly fulfilling connections.
Absolutely. So to our listeners out there, I'd ask, what's one small step you can take today to strengthen one of your relationships? It could be initiating an open and honest conversation, expressing your appreciation for someone you care about, or setting a healthy boundary that honors your needs.
Whatever it is, remember that you have the power to make a difference in your relationships. Don't underestimate the impact of those small, consistent actions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those connections.